Hello, everyone. We're live. So welcome to today's show. Today we're going to be talking with Tony, who is working with Isaac Sim, and we are super excited to have someone come on here and talk about Isaac Sim because we know a lot of you in our community use it a lot, and really would the stuff Tony's doing. Oh, I can't wait to show you guys. Before we get started, I know we have some announcements. So, Edmar, do you SIGGRAPH? We need to talk about SIGGRAPH.
So it's only, we're just talking about it, but it's only a
Yeah.
few days away. Kicks off next week. There's a bunch of really exciting stuff that NVIDIA will be showing there, presenting papers. We're involved in sessions. I think I've been mentioning that we've created a bunch of channels on our Discord server. So if people want to start talking about some of those sessions, you can actually start talking about them now. But they're really meant for people to chat with other attendees during the sessions and after, so you don't lose track of people that might be interested in the same topics you are. So that's on our Discord server, which is just discord.gg/NVIDIA Omniverse. We also have a very special live stream happening next week where we're going to talk about some of the news and events at SIGGRAPH. We're going to have Richard Karras will be joining us. I don't know how much is public on who's coming, but it's going to be a special live stream. Also very special because what are we announcing, Wendy, during the live stream?
The
Do you know?
Machinima
Yeah.
contest winners.
Yes.
It's gonna be
That
so
is.
awesome.
It's crazy. I think every contest, we're always so blown away by the stuff we get. This one was no exception. The judges had a really difficult time, and so we're going to announce who the winners are, including a bunch of honorable mentions that it was very competitive. But there's some that were just didn't make the cut, but they were so awesome. We're gonna promote those as well. A really fantastic. So that's going to be on Tuesday. I think NVIDIA Studios announcing it at 9 a.m. Pacific in the morning, and then our live stream is going to be at 12 p.m. Pacific on Tuesday. So we're going to go in more depth. We're actually putting together a little highlight reel so people can enjoy some of the work. So that's going to be a lot of fun. But there are a lot of sessions on the NVIDIA Omniverse forums. We actually have a pinned post about
Yeah.
everything happening at SIGGRAPH, broken down by session and links in the Discord channels. So definitely check that out because that's a really helpful kind of guide to everything happening at once. And then the other thing, I guess, that's really important for us to talk about, especially the Paul's here and Maddie, is that we are right in the middle, I guess, of our Extend Omniverse contest. There is still plenty of time. But Paul, what is this contest, and why should people submit?
Great. So this is the Extend Omniverse contest. So this is about tool makers building tools and publishing them into Omniverse so that all of your potential customers can have access to these tools, or your fellow creators in Omniverse can have tools that make their lives a little bit easier and a little bit better. So it's very cool and exciting. I really love the notion of just unlocking the potential of the creative community by bringing to bear the tool making community. It's just like this huge force multiplier. It's so fun. So yeah, we've got until August 19th to submit the extensions. And what we've seen so far, I think, is that most people have really big ideas. So like 4 to 6 months from now, I imagine seeing some like crazy, amazing extensions coming in. But I also see people submitting right now very cool, interesting extensions that take them a couple days to make, right? So we saw one from TAA, it was a day and a half. We saw a bunch from SyncTwin, who was on the order of days. So getting in and starting to build them now, there's plenty of time to get in and build that first little bit of really cool value that you would give out to customers. I would say the best way that I've seen to get people started is to just go build one. There's a video out there that's build an extension in 10 minutes. And once you build that one, you're like, okay, I kind of get the end to end. And now I've got to dig into my special use cases and start to check things out. We've got at SIGGRAPH, if you happen to be going to SIGGRAPH, we have 3 workshops that we'll be doing that walk you through the 3 different categories of the contest. One is scene layout. This is like adding stuff to the scene, adding any kind of object, like adding a fence or adding whatever you might want to add to the scene. The other area of the contest is the scene manipulator. So this is those little UI bits that will let you grab onto objects or will affect your camera, so you can line shots up a little bit better. And then the third area is UI, so how to build a dialogue with all the proper knobs and dials and fiddly bits. So we're here to help you all the way through. If anybody's got any questions about how to do it, don't spend too long trying. Like, just get in there and start building. If you hit a speed bump, go to Discord, start raising your hand. Jen and Ashley and Eric are there. Maddie's there. I'm there sometimes. I want to be there more. So like, please be there. We will gladly help you get things rolling. I know a bunch of questions have come through there and through the forums. So that's awesome, and thank you. Anyway, it's a really exciting time. It's really neat to see what people are going. It's inspiring to see what people are going to build, and I can only imagine how super powered the creative folks. And then with Antonio here, it's really cool because Antonio, I think you were probably one of the first that we spoke to. We just started reaching out to people who we saw were doing interesting stuff in Omniverse and building tools. And I remember calling you, boy, was it like a month and a half ago or something like that? We're like, hey, check it out. So I'm excited you're here to share what you've been doing. It's very cool.
It is the perfect explanation for the contest and segue to Antonio. So Antonio, I'm also equally impressed. Actually, I didn't even know you were talking to some other folks on the team already until I saw you post. Actually, Maddie brought you to my attention because of your incredible information you've been sharing to the users, and that warms our heart when we see people from the community actually sharing knowledge and information. Yeah, that it's very special to us. So we always want to find out more. And I'm so glad we did, because lo and behold, not only are you a smart, talented sharer, you're actually doing some pretty amazing things with Isaac. So why don't we start by actually learning a little bit about you, where you're studying right now. You're right now you're in your PhD program, right?
Yes. Currently, I am studying a PhD in applied robotics in Mondragon University. It's at the north, the Basque country in Spain. And yes, I am in my last year of 3 years of PhD, and
Congratulations.
Yes. And how did you start? So this is obviously a very challenging, difficult year, right, of work. What made you want to actually dive into Omniverse, and how did you hear about it?
This is an interesting because from my first year, when I started doing the PhD, I think about do a simulation, because robotics sometimes or it's recommended to start with simulation environment because are safe, are fast, than create a real world environment. And at the moment, I did not about any simulator. I start by searching the common use for robotic, like a gazebo or gazebo ignition. But one time I signed up in the NVIDIA developers because I was installing the driver of NVIDIA for my laptop. And because I don't know why, but I signed inside NVIDIA developer program. And some few days after that, I got an email. An email about the NVIDIA developer histories, and in this email I saw the announce about the Isaac Sim, robotic simulator using the NVIDIA RTX GPU to improve the render quality and real-time simulation. And by looking at it at that email, I started the process to work with Isaac Sim. This was my first contact point with Omniverse. It was about maybe June 2020, and at that point Isaac Sim were undocumented and were starting. But even knowing that, I started using it. Tried to learn about it, and after that, the whole Omniverse application and the whole Omniverse resources come, like a create, code, and view, and the other application. And of course, because Isaac Sim is based on is one of the Omniverse application, the knowledge that I acquired and working with Isaac Sim helped me to work with the other Omniverse applications.
That is, I can't believe you were worried about your English. Those watching, English is not his first language, but that is spoken very well and very fascinating to hear. That was a long time ago, actually. That was pretty, Omniverse has been in development for a while, but the public hasn't had access to it for that long. So you came in pretty much at the start, I think, when the public was. So that email was very effective. I'm glad it hit your inbox. And actually, so we were going to have someone on from the Isaac Sim team today. They couldn't make it due to a family emergency, so our thoughts are with them. But we wanted to kind of ask. I think it's a great opportunity for someone who is a user in the community to kind of explain a little bit about what Isaac Sim is and why would people, you mentioned robotics, of course, but why would people use Isaac Sim?
Okay, maybe let me share my screen to show some content. You're on the screen. Sorry.
While he's bringing that up, another great thing about Antonio is that he really prepared for this live stream. We talked about it a few days ago, and he already had a full-blown outline of his presentation, so I could tell, Antonio, you were going to go very far.
Yes. Okay. For example, about talking Isaac Sim as a user. First, for example, let me comment this much because I am working my PhD with robotic, like I mentioned before. And for example, in the left, you can see an industrial use case that we are integrated as part of my university. And for example, under this, you can see the simulation using the NVIDIA Omniverse Isaac Sim. But this simulation or this environment can be constructed also using another Omniverse application, like a Create, or for example, inside of the code Omniverse application. Like, for example, the digital twin of our lab at the right. You can see, for example, the real laboratory and the digital twin, or the simulated using the Omniverse. But again, this simulation can be done or can be created using, or this internal environment can be created using another application. But what offers Isaac Sim? Isaac Sim is on top of the Omniverse kit, like the other application, but offer a pack or is of extension and workflow to work with robotics. I mean, Isaac Sim is mainly, this is my conception as a user for working and to creating a virtual robotics simulation environment. Because this is packed with several extensions that are specific for robotic, like, for example, the robot operating system or the URDF loader to bring robotic models to the simulation, and many other extensions for robotic, for handling grippers, reading sensors, and something are more related with robotics. And for example, even when I can simulate or I can create the environment using another application, like a Create, for example, to do the simulation of a robotic environment, or for example, to start controlling the robot or the conveyor belt, or using ROS. For example, in this example, I did using Isaac Sim because it's the application for that. It's the application that pack all the extension for robotics sim, like you can see in my screen, for example. And Okay, this is something about I can say about Isaac Sim as a user, and I don't know if you have.
That's awesome. And yeah, so a big topic, and getting bigger by the day, it seems like, is the whole concept of a digital twin, right? And how a lot of companies and industries are really realizing that the digital twin concept is something that could really speed up their efficiency, lower their costs by basically developing things, whether it's a product or a service or a machine factory floor with a lot of automation. The more that you can develop this digitally, the more you can work out any kinks. So we've had the Isaac team on before, and they showed off, basically a robot on the desk. And they were able to control it from the computer, obviously, but seeing everything kind of in sync and work together and work out any kinks there is just, I think, once you think about it that way, I think you can realize very quickly how cost saving it would be if you don't do these digital twins, especially for larger projects. It could, any little mistake or error in efficiency can actually be quite costly to fix. So I think it's a fascinating area. We'll begin talking a lot about it, I think, at GTC coming up, especially. But yeah, thanks for sharing that.
And the scale of it is huge too, right? Like,
yeah,
if you think about every product that exists will be designed digitally, and every product that's designed digitally and then exists will be made in a factory that is designed digitally, and then that factory will be operated digitally. I've even heard people talk about like how the notion is that the real thing is actually the twin, because you've made it digitally and then you create a real world twin of that digital artifact, right? It's kind of but the enormity of it is just like, wow, how do you stitch together these entire workflows and these factories, entire supply chains through this? And the cost savings could just be tremendous. And that's where a lot of the business model is right now, is like finding ways to accelerate getting things done and achieving bonuses, avoiding penalties, saving costs in the whole process. So yeah, this is a exciting space for me, at least, to get in and see it.
Yeah, and I guess where Omniverse kind of comes in nicely is that the processes to develop these systems can involve many different apps, many different people working in different places. And I think the biggest challenge in the past and still currently for many people is the communication between those different apps, exporting, importing, errors, just not getting all the data through. That has been a real big hindrance and costly part of the process, which Omniverse is hoping to resolve, right, by having these connections with more and more companies come in and they could communicate seamlessly, some of them in real time with live syncs, which really enables people who don't want to use the same apps, but they might have a related project, which totally makes sense. There are some great companies making some very specific apps. And all this is kind of made possible through the USD file format that's being embraced by more and more. That's kind of at the heart of what makes Omniverse kind of so powerful now.
That is the key. There's also this is a huge opportunity for the development community here, and thus the contest, really. But if you think about it, you've got the Omniverse platform and a couple key apps that we've built, but then there's all the apps that you're describing, Edmar, like the Revits of the world, the Mayas, the Houdinis, like all these apps that you use to build workflows. But even those aren't enough. You actually need to get these, like a variety of other tools on the workflow. So let me give you an example. In architecture, there's this moment where you're building the building. You've already designed it in Revit, you've got it. You've got the ability to fly your drone around the job site and get a real-time scan of the terrain and pull that in and pull that together through these big apps. But then you've got this moment where you're like, I've got to get a cement truck to back into this spot at the right moment and pour the concrete. And boy, they'd better not be in a spot where they're like still cutting a trench for the electrical people, or the foreman's truck is still parked there. And so the foreman on the site needs to be able to say, here's the parking lot. Here's where we need people to be moved from. Here's the job orders for the security team, all that kind of, and those are tools that are not Revit and not Houdini and not Maya. These are the tools that the startups and the people in this community are going to go make to help those entire workflows save hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars in these big construction projects. And so they have a huge opportunity to be a part of that cost savings, which is a way to sell your services into them. So this, and you see that with the partners we've got so far, showing stuff like SyncTwin and TAA and a few others that are coming. Like they're a part of this optimization process. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity for developers right now to be a part of that value chain.
Yeah, so that's a perfect way to get back to the focus of Antonio's development of these extensions for Isaac. I would just love to dive more into that, if possible, Antonio, and talk about the extensions you've been making and you are still developing. Tell us a little bit about the purpose and motivation.
Okay, I'm going to share the screen again because I did some small presentation for that. Yes, like you mentioned, I created some extension to extend mainly the Isaac Sims functionality as a requirement for the development of my PhD. Sometimes also for fun because I like to program. I love programming. I wanted to learn more about Omniverse by creating the extensions by programming for Omniverse. And for example, here I'm going to show you 3 extensions because the last 2 ones are the same bot for different versions of the robot operating system. But before I start, I would like to mention, as a developer, from my perspective, as a user of Omniverse, what do I have and what do I check to create a new extension or to find for support or documentation or something about for the creation process. And one of the most important things and that from the beginning I have followed and checked is the documentation and the tutorials, because there are mainly one of the best contact point with the application, because there is the information about what is the application and how to use it. And for example, not only the NVIDIA Omniverse documentation, but also tutorials and video on demands, and also the documentation for the USD from Pixar, because NVIDIA Omniverse is using USD to authoring, creating, and modifying the scene. But apart from the documentation, another important thing for me as a developer is the forum. There are also a chat, like for example, we are not on Discord, but for me, I usually, or I always have open at least 2 tabs in my browser. One for the Omniverse and the other one dedicated to the robotic implementation, because Omniverse dedicated to the robotic implementation, because Omniverse Isaac Sim is apart. I mean, it's not in the same category. If you go to the forum, Omniverse is not in the same category like the other. Isaac Sim is not inside the same category, right, like the Create or the another one. It's apart, and I always have those 2 tabs open and read all the question and answer from the community and the Omniverse team, because the problem or the issue or the idea from one user today could be or can be the issue or the problem that I could present in the future or during my development. So I always read those topics inside of the documentation. And
I'm learning from the forums too.
Yes, I use
People have some really great questions now.
And also I use it to try to help people from my perspective of another user.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm glad to do it. And another important thing I have as a developer is the applications. The application that I can download from the Omniverse launcher and the source code. I mean, maybe I don't have access to the whole source code, or there's something that I cannot access, but I can use the Visual Studio Code, for example, to access to the code. And sometimes when I have a problem and I cannot find the solution directly in the forum or through the tutorial, I use for example, the code editor to find and read code. And for example, I want to teleport some print and or I want to do some operation that I don't know, I use the search bar of the editor and look inside the code, because, for example, many of the code is developed in Python and it's easy to read and it's well commented. So I look inside, sometimes inside of the code for answer or for ideas or for a small snippet that help me to create or to develop the extensions. And this is very important also for me too. And one way that I use, not only for me, but also sometimes for help another people. Maybe I don't know the answer, but I look inside of the code and I try and test, and sometimes I got a lot of fails, but it does not stop me. I keep trying until I be able to do something that run in the terminal or in the application. Yes. So this is for me one or of another important thing I have as a developer, the access to the application and the source code. Okay.
Yeah, it's always weird to tell people, yeah, just look through the source code, because other applications, it's not as easily accessible, but a lot of the functionality in Omniverse is written in Python and not compiled, so you can just go right into the application directory and look things up. So yeah, I think I'm always recommending that as well, even though it seems weird that we would recommend it, but yeah, just find something you like in an Omniverse app and check how it was built.
Yes.
Yeah, it's been one of my biggest learning curves for sure, because I'm constantly going to Google and searching for things, and then Maddie's like, hey, click that and hit F12, and then like, oh, hey, cool, right? And actually saying how it's working. So it's pretty cool. And now I do that a lot. I go find a feature inside of Create or View or whatever, and then I go to the extension manager, find the extension that builds that thing out. Like I was looking at the timeline control just today, and I wanted to get the FPS counter off the timeline control. So I found that extension, opened it up in Visual Studio, searched through it for FPS, found where it was at, and then found the USD commands that run it. So yeah, it's a very common pattern that I wasn't used to before this.
Well, I use it a lot apart from the forum and the documentation. Yes. Okay. Now I'm going to share again my screen to show, for example, an overview about the extension I created and some good or some practical thing that can be used, for example, for the next context or for the development in general. Okay. Taking again the Isaac Sim architecture, I adapted the figure to include, for example, the extensions. And for example, inside Isaac Sim, there are the extensions integrated with the Omniverse application. And I put in a top layer a user extension box. And for example, you can find the extension I created, the OpenXR or the data visualizer of the some cross bridge like the Isaac Sim one, but with another functionality to allow controlling robot using the robot operating system that is quite common and famous inside of the robotic community. For example, let's start with one of these extensions. You can find all those extensions on GitHub. They are an open source. I mean, you can find all the code, and there is not hidden from the user. You can navigate and identify the structure that follow the structure recommended by Omniverse to create extensions and navigate inside that. And for example, this is one of the first extensions I created, maybe the first one if I remember, that allow to switch the Matplotlib and OpenCV backend that are quite common library used typically by data scientific and robotics to process and visualize data. And the idea of this extension is to allow me to show the image generated using Matplotlib, or show using OpenCV API, the same API, without change anything, the image inside the Omniverse application. And why I created that? Because at the beginning, when I started with Isaac Sim, I did not have a laptop with a GPU, and I have in my university a remote servers, but there are headless servers. I mean, I cannot have a display connected to those servers. And Isaac Sims offer another Omniverse application also offers the functionality to create a remote visualization. I mean, you put the simulator to run in a remote workstation, like Amazon, for example, web service, or like in a remote Docker anywhere. And you have a streaming functionality to display and interact with the application. And at that point, because I don't have the possibility to run Isaac Sim locally, I needed to visualize data. That is why I created this extension at the first place. But apart, or for example, let me show in a small working example. If I go, for example, to the Matplotlib documentation, I can just copy an example and run it and show the extension working inside the Isaac Sim. Let me check the extension is. I mean, this is the extension window where I can find all the extension I have installed, and even I can find or enable or disable those extensions. For example, I'm going to enable the extension, the visualizer, and after enable that, I can use, for example, the script editor, pass the code and execute it, and voila, the image is inside of Omniverse. It's inside of Omniverse. But not only Matplotlib, using the same API. I mean, I did not change the Matplotlib API, but also I can have, for example, the OpenCV generate a random noise image using NumPy and OpenCV, and voila, by executing it, I have, for example, you can see how it's changing. I have the image inside. But what about if I want to come back to, because, for example, here I have the application in my desktop. Well, I can just disable the extension, and if I execute it, for example, if I execute it, I have the same image but outside the application, and
right.
That is all. I mean, just enable and disable the extension, and it works. I mean, this is the purpose for this extension. And a part of the functionality, what does the implementation offer? And for example, if you go to the code, this extension is an example about how to protect Python code from being read by user, or how to distribute the extension as a binary file. If you go to the GitHub extension, you can find, for example, the source code inside of the source code of the extension. But you can also find some scripts that compile extension. And for example, for distribution, you can generate a binary form or a binary file for the extension. For example, this is for a Windows operating system, and this is for Linux. And this extension is an example about how to hide or to protect the code from being read by user. For example, if you are in a context of an enterprise or company, you can, for example, distribute the extension by protecting the code. And this is an example that the user can go and try and visit and check how it's implemented. Another extension I created at the beginning that is more generic was a compact binding for creating extended reality application on top of OpenXR. Currently in Omniverse, there is the Omniverse XR application that is on top of NVIDIA Cloud XR framework or platform. But I created that. This was at the beginning, even before some months before the release of the Omniverse XR application, to be able to go inside of the simulation, and offer to the user a simple APN, a simple and compact Python API, because the OpenXR standard is done or is in C++, but I created a compact Python binding to be able to control not only the information that you display on the headset, but also the input from the controllers, for example, or even apply output like a haptic vibration to the controllers. And for example, this is a small video about that, a very short video that you can see that you can use the extension by programming in Python. You can paste a simple code, and you will be able to visualize inside of the headset the current viewport for each age, I mean the left and the eye age, the current viewport. So I am using the Omniverse render capability to generate, to show this image on the age, on the headset. But for programming, by programming, you can use, for example, and read the information of the button of the controller and modify the size of the sphere, for example, like you can see in this video. And a part of the functionality, what does the implementation offer? Well, this extension is an example about how wrapping C or C++ code inside an extension developed in Python, using using two approaches, using the native or built-in type library with Python, or using the external Python library PyBinding, PyBin 11 for that. I mean, this is an example. If you go to the source code that is open on GitHub, you will be able to identify inside of the structure of the extension, you will be able to identify, for example, the loading and using of the set types. For example, this is for the set type implementation, or for the PyBin bin 11 implementation. So you can create the extension, or you can create code using C++.
This is really great, Antonio. Yeah, so as much as I'm always a proponent for Python, and I'm super on board with it, there are times where it's just not fast enough, right? And in Omniverse, we do have parts that are written in C++, and then wrapped with Python. So it's really awesome to see you doing this as an external user, and sharing that workflow of how to have a C++ project, build it, bind it with Python, and that the API accessible through Python. So that's really awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay, I actually think, for example, if I look inside, I'm seeing on another Omniverse application, some of the extension I created using C++, and for example, using PyBin 11 are compiled to Python and offered at the user as a Python too. So I wanted to replicate this behavior to learn from the process, to learn from the process, and to allow another user, for example, to get access and try where they can do something similar or help them to do it. And for example, the last one is the ROS bridge, which enable ROS and ROS2 action server for controlling robots using MoveIt. This is from the robotic domain. ROS is a robot operating system acronym. It's a framework for developing and communicating robot application. It's quite famous inside of the robotic community. And I extended, because ISAC has, like I mentioned in the system architecture diagram, has a ROS bridge and ROS2 bridge extension. But particularly, I extended the functionality to add the follow Young trajectory and gripper command actions to control the manipulator from MoveIt. I mean, you can do it currently without this extension using ISAC, but I created the extension for controlling using the follow Young trajectory and gripper command, and also providing service for agile prototyping of robotic application. And I'm going to share a small example what I mean about faster or agile prototyping robotic application through a service. For example, through an example. Just a second, let me load ISAC. Okay. I have.
You're not sharing your screen.
I'm sorry. sorry for that. Okay. Go live. Okay.
There we go.
Okay. Yes. I was mentioning about the ROS and ROS bridge extension, and now I'm going to show a small idea about using that. And for example, this is the digital twin replica of my laboratory, and by using the ROS extension, I can, for example, ROS topic list. Sorry, it's not in play. I'm going to play it. Okay. I can, by ROS topic list, not only control the robot, but also I can, for example, calling a simple ROS attribute client. You can see that I am turning on and off the light. And this extension allows the users to modify the USD properties. For example, if I go to the, there is a shader, if I, for example, the green one, there is a shader that have the property for displaying the color of the light tower. And by the extension, using ROS, I am controlling the attribute of this prim to enable and disable, as you can see in my screen, the emission. So I can, from ROS, control and modify and read any attribute of any prim. And this allows me to develop agile prototyping, because otherwise I need to program a system to communicate with ROS and modify this specific attribute, but this allows user to modify any attribute of any prim on the stage, on the current stage. But apart from the functionality, what you can identify, what this implementation offers to the user. Well, this is an example also of including custom ROS and ROS2 message type inside of Omniverse extension, particularly for ISAC, and develop also custom OmniGraph node, because in the latest release of ISAC, the implementation of the ROS bridge was moved to the OmniGraph implementation. And also I moved my implementation to OmniGraph nodes. And this is another example that the user can visit to see how to do it. And yes, this is a small overview about the extension I developed.
That was amazing. Yeah.
I just
think-
feel like
I love
Go ahead.
the value that each one of those extensions provides, and I love your ethos, which is
Yeah.
and here's how you learn from it, right? You're sharing both the value directly and the teaching people how to learn from it, which I think is so cool. Yeah, it's just great. Thank you.
I think it
You're welcome.
perfectly illustrates the power of Omniverse. Just amazing.
I feel like we just got a preview of a future GTC talk.
Yes.
You're very good at explaining everything, which is great. And you really put a lot of thought into it, I think.
Yeah.
I'm really excited. So I have to ask, like, where are you headed? Where are you going to take this knowledge and this expertise? What are your plans for the future with this type of work?
Sorry, could you please?
Your plans for the future. What would you like to do next?
For example, currently I am developing on my free time, when I have in the small free time, a new extension for reinforcement learning, for visual programming. It's about creating a visual programming framework for reinforcement learning using the OmniGraph. The OmniGraph capabilities. Let me show. For example, let me share my screen to show a preview. It's a work that is in progress. There are a lot of room of improvement and implementation, and it is based on this library. I created a reinforcement learning library because this is my field of study inside of my PhD. That apart from support the conventional environment, it also support the NVIDIA Omniverse and NVIDIA Isaac Gene environment that allow simulating hundreds and thousands of environment in parallel.
Wow.
And this library is a generic reinforcement learning library, but that also enable allow to interact with NVIDIA Isaac Gene environment, which is part of Omniverse Isaac Sim. You can find it inside the Omniverse Isaac Sim application and documentation. And now this is a library that you can use. Is programming in Python, and you can use the library by programming in Python. But I am creating. Just let me connect to the remote computer.
Show
I am
us
creating
nodes.
a visual programming framework for that, for controlling. Let me Windows Visual Scripting, generic graph, edit graph. Okay, if you there are some nodes that help users to control the application. And for example, in reinforcement learning, you have a model, you have a memory, you have an agent that learn from the interaction with the environment. And if I close the node connection, there is a training process for the carpol for the OpenAIGene carpol example. This is currently what I have created. The idea is to extend it for allowing control learning and evaluating agent using not only OpenAIGene but also DeepMind and of course Omniverse NVIDIA Isaac Gene environment inside, providing a framework for creating the world reinforcement learning system for non-programming users. Because the plus of OmniGraph is that you can create a programming system with a visual component, just connecting the input and output about that. And for example, the idea is after finish the extension, you type the name of the library and you will have several nodes that you can connect and you can play with that. And for example, also you can, by controlling the node, for example, with some input from the keyboard or something like that, I'm going to do it manually, pause the visualization or the rendering process inside the Omniverse. Or, for example, this is one of the things I'm working on my free time because I am doing my PhD and this is the last year and I hope to finish on time, but on my free time I created that. And one of the proposals for that was to learn how to use OmniGraph to create it more complex programming and more complex node and yes, I like I said before, I love programming and I love to learn from programming. I mean, from doing the activity of programming. That's it. Okay.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It really is. I'm hearing you continue to explain new things you're doing. How are you? How are you sleeping? Do you sleep?
Right.
Yes. Sometimes. Yeah. I try to have a healthy life, but
No, but I think I mean no joking. You are you're very inspiring. I think to all of us, and I think the community as well. And I can tell you how grateful we are to have your presence in our community, sharing your work so openly and helping others. And I think this live stream is going to be a tremendous resource for people on the YouTube channel and also on NVIDIA On Demand afterwards. So thank you for putting so much thought and care into putting all this together, walking us through. Definitely really impressive. And I think you should work at NVIDIA when you're ready. So let me know when you're
Yes.
when you're done with your PhD.
well,
And
I'm going to tell you the word. And
Yes.
after finishing my PhD, I'm going
Yes.
to tell you. Okay.
Oh,
Yes. Sure.
that would be
I
amazing.
will be happy to
And
be part
I
of the Omniverse family.
Yes.
I pasted the link to Antonio's blog. It was just went live the other day. So we have a nice article on Antonio's work, covering some of what he spoke about today. He's also on LinkedIn. If you just look him up, you can just look up Antonio Serrano, and I think it wouldn't be one of the first hits that comes up. And we did have one question. So I don't know. Let me see. Probably Paul or Maddie. This would be good for you. So I think it came from Data Juggler, and Data Juggler asked, "How do I install an extension to create after I build in code?" And I think we touched on this in a recent stream also. But what's because I think this process might be changing. But what's the process to kind of install an extension after you build it in code?
I think even on our last live stream, we had, I think Star might have showed us how he takes the path either to a local file path with the exts folder at the end, or to a GitHub link, and you paste that into the extension manager. There's a little gear icon. You click that, and it opens up a detail section where you can add new paths to extensions. Once you've done that, it'll list your extension with the rest of them, and you can search for it and enable it.
So I'd love to build on that answer, because that's exactly right, particularly while you're developing. The other way that these things get surfaced is there's a community tab inside the extensions manager, and I wish I still had it open, but I don't. And in there, you can see a bunch of extensions that the community has published, like Antonio's extensions are in there. And the way you get them in there is on GitHub, you add the topic, Omniverse Kit extensions, and you set a release, and then they'll show up in that community section. And then the other way is through the Exchange. And so the way you get your extensions exposed in the Exchange is first get them into that community extension, and then we're watching that list, and then we'll reach out and we'll figure out how to get your extensions moved over into Exchange.
Thank you so much. And on that topic, like we said earlier, we're currently in the middle of the Extend Omniverse contest. I posted a link in the chat, but you can do a quick search, Extend Omniverse contest. You'll find it right away. Super exciting prizes. I think people have a good chance of winning something if they come up with something creative. We really want to see Justin, who's our colleague, shave their head. So we want to hit what we would say 100 submissions.
100 submissions. Yeah.
100 submissions. Right now it's 31 in the GitHub repo, so we'll see. We'll see. Apparently, most of the submissions come right in the last couple weeks. So if you guys can get your stuff, that's now. Like we're a couple weeks out now, and so I would love to see it go well over 100. That would be really fantastic.
I really want to see what Justin looks like with a shaved head, personally. So I am looking forward to that. Well, I can't thank you enough, Antonio, for sharing such well thought out presented materials to the community. I really look forward to following your journey into Isaac and Omniverse more over the coming months and years, and good luck on your PhD program. We'll keep in touch, but I'm really happy to have had you here today. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you for the time and for the invitation. And
If you had one piece of advice for somebody who's just kind of getting started, what would it be?
Sorry, could you please?
If you have one tip or one piece of wisdom for developers that are just starting out, perhaps you've inspired them today to start developing. What would you suggest?
Don't be afraid from fail during the creation of the code and during programming, and go ahead, be persistent, and you will have success after that. This was my experience. I failed a lot. What this is doing not work. It's a mess, but at the end, be persistent. Be persistent and you will be able to achieve your goal.
Real life reinforcement learning.
Yes, real life reinforcement learning. Yes, and you learn a lot about this. Yes. Okay.
Very wise words, and I think a perfect way to close this live stream. So thank you so much, Antonio, Paul, Maddie, Queen of the Stream, Wendy, and of course the community who's watching. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you Tuesday next week, so a different day of the week, because we're going to be doing a very special show for SIGGRAPH. We're going to announce the winners of the Machinima contest, like Wendy mentioned, and have a lot of other goodies in store for that live stream we're working on right now. So could be a good show, 12 p.m. Pacific on Tuesday. And until then, you can find us on Discord. So we'll see you on the forums or on Discord. Thanks everybody for watching.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
I'm kinda like complicated.